Hello, and thank you for joining us on the Freedom from the Struggle podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Corelli. Tonight, we have an amazing letter from a woman named Josephine. Now, when I received this letter a few weeks ago, I have to say that it was one that touched my heart so much, and I wanted to insert it somewhere in the podcast that I felt was the most impactful. And so, as we're moving into the second half of season two, I wanted this letter to be a catalyst for those who may listen and may not necessarily ever write in or call in for an interview, but may just feel like there's some questions they have. Are demons real? Is what I am experiencing demonic? Are demons so strong or so powerful that they could actually possess me or influence my life? Who is attacked by demons? How does it work? That type of a thing. And so this letter to me came at a good time. It gave me just enough time to prepare it and to put it in the episode list. And so I have found that in this episode, which is episode 12 of season 2, that I want this to inspire some of you. And if it inspires you to write in and talk to us about your story, or if it's just something that you maybe needed to hear, great. I think it will also help the audience who is interested in the paranormal, because the letter may have that shock entertainment value of a horror story, but it may also inspire you to take a look at what you're getting into if you're into the paranormal. And I don't mean that in a casual way. I mean that more in a kind of an obsessive way. And what we're messing with is so strong and so evil, but it's so subtle and so crafty that by the time we realize what's going on, many times, most of the time, it's too late. And so before we get to the letter, I wanted to take the time to just catch you up on a couple of things that are going on here at Freedom from the Struggle and the Struggle series. The parent company for my podcast as well as my books is called the Struggle series. And you can always find out information there at thestruggleseries.com. Now, I am going to be revamping that website because it was a basic website just for people to find out about my books. And to be honest, when this podcast started, I've kind of become so tunnel vision that I haven't really, upgraded or enhanced the website like I should. But over the next couple of weeks, that will be happening. But you can find out about us there. And I wrote these trilogy of books called the Struggle series back starting in 2017, 2018-ish. And I wrote all 3 books in the matter of about a month and a half. That was first drafts, of course. But these books have been inside of me for a while for a reason. Now, I noticed at the time that, and even now, this continues, that there's an obsession with the paranormal, with the occult, with horror as a genre. And I knew that people are hungry for spiritual knowledge. And many people become entertained or even obsessed with the paranormal because it's speaking of spirituality, not in the sense of a religion, but in a sense of the same things that religion is seeking to answer in terms of questions that humans have. And so I wrote these books as a way to reach a group of people that are maybe not fond of the church, or maybe have been wounded by the church, or maybe just don't see church as relevant, but would listen to information about the church if it was put in the right package. And so I wrote these books as a hybrid. So when people ask me, and I just put my new audiobook, which I'm going to talk about here in a second, on a couple of sites where people collect these stories, and then people can go to that site and select it almost like a reading list. And when people ask me, well, what genre or genres does this fit in? I always laugh, and sometimes they laugh with me, because it's a horror novel, but it's also a detective novel. But it's got a Christian gospel message intertwined in it. So is it a religious book? Is it a horror novel? Or is it a true crime detective novel? Yes, it's all three. And so these books tell the story of a pastor named Anthony, and I know that probably shocks you where I got that name, but a pastor named Anthony who has been struggling with seeing demons and interacting with demons his whole life, grows up to be a pastor and goes out to help people who are struggling with demonic activity. In the stories, however, crimes occur and detectives get involved and even suspect the pastor and his team of being part of the murders that are occurring. But during the process, the detectives become believers because they see too much to not believe that demons are real. And so the stories are well known for having many twists and turns and shocking endings. And I don't profess to be Stephen King. I'm not an author. I'm a storyteller. So the books wouldn't be ones that would win any awards, but there is a good message to these books. And because the books, especially books 1 and 2, have gotten a little bit older, I've decided that I'm going to release them as podcasts, as separate podcasts on Spotify and wherever you listen to your podcasts. I will eventually, excuse me, I will eventually move them over to YouTube and Rumble as well. But these things take time. I want to get them on those channels first, because I just want people to have the messages. And as people begin to listen to this podcast and are starting to know about me, you hear me make little comments about the book. But, going back and buying a book that's a few years old, or, times are tight and you got, plenty of other things to spend your money on, I wanted to just make them available to people who wanted to listen. And so if you are interested in that, the first book, as of this recording, I think we're about chapter 5, chapter 6 of the first book. So it's not quite halfway there, but you can listen to several chapters right now as we speak. Now, because the title of my first book is called The Struggle, any search on a search engine is going to yield you 7,000 things before you stumble upon my book. So what I'm going to do is give you the specific place to find it. You're going to type in The Struggle and a colon, then book 1 hyphen The Struggle series. And that way it'll take you right to it. And if you're familiar with the podcast, I used the first cover art of the first book as the logo for the podcast. So you'll see the book cover of The Struggle. It looks very similar to the cover art of this podcast. And so if you're interested in that, go find that. I'd love for you to listen to that book. And, it's free if you have, your subscriptions where you listen to your podcast. And feel free to, give us a like, review, comments, shout out. All positive reviews are welcomed, because, again, I'm not trying to make $1 million. I want this message out here because I want to reach a group of people that Christians may not traditionally be fond of. Now, with that being said, I get a lot of heat from Christians because when Christians hear that I wrote horror novels, I'm some sort of pariah. I'm some sort of, I guess, bad Christian or false Christian, because why would a Christian do that? Well, I'm trying to reach an audience that you couldn't. And before you judge, I would highly suggest that you read the books, skim through them, because you'll see there's more gospel in that than probably 3 or 4 sermons you've heard combined in the last 2 weeks. Trust me, the books are written for a purpose. And keep in mind, if you watch horror movies or you've met people in real life, you get people who do not believe in God. When they see severe, drastic demonic activity, the first thing that pops into their head is, we better get a priest. We better get a religious person. Because deep down inside, they know that they're above, and this is above and beyond any of their knowledge or ability to help. And so they know who to go to. And so these books are about that. So again, if you are interested in that, please feel free to give us a listen, give us some feedback. I would greatly appreciate that. I would say that book 1 will probably be done in the next couple of weeks, and then we're going to jump right to book 2. And we're in the process of figuring out what we'll do with book 3, as that is still with the publisher. We have some massive delays there that are well beyond my control, but we may choose to release that before the book's even released. So we have some contractual stuff we have to deal with there. So I wanted to give you that. I appreciate you letting me take the time to do that. Now, what I wanted to do is get to this letter of Josephine, and you're going to see that Josephine's purpose of this letter is very much similar to what I was just saying. And so before I get to the letter, I want to kind of give you something I just saw recently, just saw today, actually. I'm sorry, it was yesterday. There was a story about a man in California who apparently witnessed somebody get hit by a train, like, a train versus pedestrian accident. And this man, who appears to be homeless in the video, took the leg of the person that was hit by the train and was found by police to be eating the leg. Police pulled up on him. If you watch the video, and I don't suggest you do, but if you stumble upon it, he's waving the leg around like a trophy, but he was eating the leg. Now, for those of you who will stumble on this podcast and say demons aren't real, what you're saying is that behavior is only a result of drug abuse or mental health problems, or both. I know, and you know, several people who have diagnosable mental illness, but they don't eat people. You also see this group of people in Haiti who are literally using cannibalism, according to the media, as a way to intimidate people. But nobody stops and says, is that demonic? What could influence a person to eat somebody? That is so far gone from humanity. And I know some of you might say, well, there's still tribes somewhere that are eating people. Well, what was that about? Are those Christian tribes, or, Mormon tribes, some of the religions that, consider morality very high? Are those the types of tribes that are eating people? Of course not. That's demonic. And if you want to argue, that's fine. You can take that argument and, write it off into the sunset, because you can't convince me, and you probably can't convince most people otherwise. They know that's not normal. They know there's something wrong. And so I'm saying that, and I'm adding that before this letter, because demonic possession is terrifying when you've seen it. It is debilitating. It is overwhelming. It's all-consuming. And it will take a normal person and make them into an animal, because these demons are animalistic. Their hate is so immense that their views of us, their desire is to animalistically rip us limb from limb, literally and metaphorically. And so as we read this letter from Josephine, I want you to hear that there was once a normal person that became something else and then found something beautiful at the end. So let's get to it. This letter says, "Hey, Anthony, my name is Josephine. I've been listening to your podcast and I'm liking it very much. I don't really listen to paranormal podcasts due to some events in my past. In this case, a friend of mine found your podcast and said that it was necessary for me to listen." Well, thank you for the referral, whoever that was. I don't have that in the letter here. She was totally correct. It has been very healing for me. I don't know if you can use this letter on your podcast because I am not currently struggling with the demon. And by the way, you don't have to currently be struggling. We love all contact, and this letter was perfect. And so if you're thinking about writing in something similar, please don't hesitate. Back to the letter. I am someone who has been through deliverance, and I feel that your listeners might benefit from hearing what it was like. Absolutely. It's always amazing to hear from someone who has been through this and not just me as the moderator of this podcast talking about it. It's always good to hear it from the source. So the letter says, let me give a little background. I come from a family that was completely void of religion. I am not saying we were atheists. It was more agnostic, I guess. We never talked about God, ever. It was like we all had the ability to just avoid the topic when we heard it on the television or in public. We had some family friends that were of different faiths, but they didn't seem to bring it up often, and we didn't ask any questions. When I was 22, I was about ready to graduate from college. I had been through a pretty bad breakup, and I was off the rails. I was drinking about 3 days per week, and I was on a destructive path. That is when I met Ammon. He was so mesmerizing. I was instantly captivated with him. Looking back, the meeting was too perfect. It was like it was scripted in a movie about a woman that meets a demon. He was so attractive and charismatic. He was charming to the point that I was instantly smitten with him. We had one of those nights where you could write it into a fairy tale. We left the bar and went for a walk around the town. He took me to the roof of his building and we just looked at the stars. He was so smart. He talked about the stars in the heavens. He was pointing out constellations and was so knowledgeable about the subject. I was captivated. It was like it was flirting, but it was deeper. It was like he was understanding me. He confessed that he had seen me before and was hoping he would run into me again. He said that when he first saw me, he felt like we were meant to be together. I bought it all, hook, line, and sinker. He was the perfect guy. I just want to make it clear that I had only been with one man prior to this night. I was not someone who sleeps around, but I found myself yearning for him. He walked me back to my place and I invited him up. We ended up being together. It was a euphoric experience. When it was over, he got up to leave. I asked him to stay, but he said he had to leave. He promised me that I would see him again. That was an understatement. I did not hear from him for a couple of days and I felt so stupid. I couldn't understand. How could I have been so deceived? I am embarrassed to say that I fell into a debilitating depression instantly. I was still sad about my previous relationship and now this. I was broken. It was five nights after I met him that it happened. I was woken up about 2:30 by a sound that I can only describe as a tearing noise, like somebody tore a phone book in half. It was so loud. I jumped up and ran to the hallway to see what it was. I was not thinking it was paranormal because it wasn't like anything I would associate with the paranormal. When I turned on the light, I saw him. It was Ammon. I wasn't excited to see him. I was terrified. He had a look on his face that was so evil I almost fainted. He then began to run down the hall towards me. He caught me in my bedroom and tackled me onto the bed. That is all I remember. I woke up at the foot of my bed on the floor. That was the beginning of the nightmare. I know now that this is when I became possessed. For the next 3 months, I was in such a bad way that I could not even function. You want to know what is crazy? My friends who were not religious almost instantly knew I was possessed. They watched me become somebody different. I would lash out at anyone for no reason at all. I even bit my friend Rich, who was assigned to look out for me. Thank God I had a good group of friends. You want to know how bad it was? My favorite professor called when he saw I wasn't going to class. He was worried because all I had to do was pass his class and I graduated. When he called, my friend Sylvia answered. She told him what was up, and he came over. He was an atheist and did not believe what they were saying. He asked if he could come by and see me. He wasn't at my apartment for 20 minutes, and he was convinced it was a demon. He saw a candelabra fly from my mantle into the kitchen. Excuse me, I don't read the word candelabra very often, I guess. Sorry about that. Let me go back. He saw a candelabra fly from my mantle into the kitchen. He then heard me say things to him that were so vulgar that he was shocked. He then felt hands wrap around his neck, even though we couldn't see them. It almost strangled him. He was the one that said we needed to find a priest. My friend, who was a Christian, knew a pastor and had that pastor come over and meet me. He also knew quickly that I was possessed. I told him things about himself that I could have never known. 2 days later, I was at his church with a big group of people. We went to the front of the church and I was kicking and screaming the whole way. After 3 hours, I was delivered from this demon that had a hold on me. Let me explain. There are so many things that I do not remember because when the demon would take over, I would black out. My friends tell me that I was doing and saying things that were so vulgar that I wouldn't put them in this letter. What I do remember is that the demon wanted me to kill my friends and then myself. The pastor and his team were so great. I owe them my life. After college, I moved back to my hometown for a job, but before I left, I went to that church and received discipleship from some amazing people. Needless to say, I am a sold-out Christian. I love Jesus so much, and I tell everyone I meet about him. The problem is, when I tell people about these events, people think I am crazy. I bet you know exactly what that's like. Yes, Josephine, I know exactly what that's like. My heart hurts for the countless people that do not believe that demons are real, and they are out to destroy us. I want your audience to know that demons are real, and they want to use us like pawns. They want to have us join them in their eternal damnation. I hope that anyone who hears this will know that it is real. I was a normal person. I wasn't a Christian, but I didn't worship the devil either. I still don't know why I was chosen. My current pastor said that this scheme was in motion for my whole life. It was waiting for the right time when I was at my weakest. I can't argue with that. Please tell your audience that there is hope and healing in a relationship with Jesus. Let me say that again. Please tell your audience that there is hope and healing in a relationship with Jesus. You don't have to be a weird Christian. True. You have to have a relationship with him. The more you know him, the more you will understand what you've been missing your whole life. Thank you so much for your time. Feel free to share this on your podcast. I hope and pray that you will. Sincerely, Josephine. Now, I did reach out to Josephine and we did connect for just a brief moment. I did let her know that I would be reading this on the podcast, but she is actually on a vacation. And so I told her, you just go on vacation. If you have time to listen to it on Wednesday, that would be great. And if not, just listen to it when you get back. So don't worry, just enjoy your time and then come back and we'll connect again. And so I look forward to hearing from her, but there was a excitement to her because her whole goal of writing the letter as well as walking through life is to tell people about Jesus. And her testimony, of course, is unique compared to most. You know, when we are Christians and we're talking to non-Christians or people who are struggling with Christianity, we use our testimony as our way to, I guess, relate the message of how we found Jesus to be vital in our lives. Well, when your testimony is that you were demonically possessed, you're going to get frowned upon. You're going to get mocked, ridiculed. You definitely will struggle with unbelief. And, people will call you crazy. But if you're listening to this podcast, more than likely you are not somebody who would consider this woman crazy. And what I want to do is take the time to give you some information through this letter in case you are wondering how these things happen. Now, what we first have to do is kind of wrestle with the concept of demonic oppression versus possession. And oppression isn't always the best word, but I use that because that's what is known in the paranormal world. I like demonic attachments, and what level of attachment, maybe is a better way to put it, but we're going to run with oppression and possession for the purpose of keeping this simple. This woman was demonically possessed, not oppressed. But let's say you are oppressed and you have a demon that's attached to you. It's influencing you. It's speaking in your ear. It's got a grip on you. When you go through deliverance, you will experience a level of disconnecting. It is very much now I realize what part of me that this demon has a hold of. And different demons have different assignments, and therefore they are most often named as such. So a demon of lust will attach to you out of lustful behaviors. A demon of infidelity will attach to you through infidelity. Now, there's an entire group of Christians that will say that people like me need to shut our mouths and stop naming these demons, because really what we're doing is we're naming our own sin. And they get feisty and angry, and I laugh sometimes because I'm like, why are you so upset at semantics? Of course, the demon of lust isn't going to attack me at the same level it's going to attack somebody who is in a lustful, sinful state. If I'm not somebody who struggles with lust, that demon of lust is going to move past me and go to the person who is lustfully sinful. So if you want to just say I'm naming sins, no. That person who is angrily talking about that may have a demon of self-righteousness or a demon of deception. Because I'm not saying that a demon has a name tag called lust and his name is Lust J. Satan, and that's his name, where he gets his mail in hell. I'm saying that demons have assignments and demons have a set of skills, and that's who they attach to. I am somebody, and I'm always transparent with you, I am somebody who will always struggle with anger as a sin. That has nothing to do with the demon. Me as a person has, in my life, had problems with anger. That is my sin. That is in my flesh. Those are burdens that I carry. Now, I'm much better than I used to be, but I've not arrived. So I am more susceptible to a demon of anger or a demon of rage or wrath, then you might be. But I am not saying that the demon of anger possessed me. I had never been angry before. And then all of a sudden, I became, this rageful person. That demon just knew who to attach to, right? Well, very much in this case, this demon was a demon that I'm not sure if you're aware, but when I heard the name, I just from my knowledge and experience and my education in my life, I understand who Amun or Ammon, however you choose to say it, is related to the demonic hierarchy. If you hear the term Amun or Ammon in Egyptian folklore or Egyptian religion, Ammon was an Egyptian, like a ram-headed god who was a demon of life and reproduction. So it doesn't shock me that this man named Ammon, who I believe was probably a demon disguised as a person, but man, that theology is going to get crazy. Or it was a person who was possessed by Ammon who was using that as his name to interact with this woman. And was that really him that was in her apartment that night, or was it a manifestation? You see how complicated that gets? And that's something we can debate for 16 hours, and we're just not going to do that here. But it doesn't shock me that name surfaced in a demon that would use the subtlety of sexuality and like a giver of life type thing to attack her in that way, or I should say, lure her in that way. He attacked her physically. I also believe that a demon of depression, and this is speculation and conjecture, but please hear me out. A demon of depression had settled upon her through her breakup. So it sounds to me, and we didn't get to go over the details of this, but it sounds to me that this is a woman who was feeling the depression of a breakup and was trying to use kind of a party lifestyle. I think she said her term was off the rails, if I'm not mistaken. So she was trying to mask that depression. And so I agree with the pastor that is her current pastor, that this was a scheme that was in play and that everything lined up for that specific time in her life. One of the questions I get asked often is why was I chosen? Well, the answer to that is we're all chosen. And we will all have our moments where demons make their move. One of the things that I believe strongly, and it took me many years to understand this concept, but I have figured it out. At least in my mind, I have. Maybe you would debate me, but there was a man that I could remember seeing many times in my life. Now, I come from a town of about 100,000 people, which isn't tiny, but it's definitely enough where, there are many familiar faces. You remember that thing that, a couple decades back where they said the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, where they would say that we're all related like 6 degrees apart from each other. So I may not know President Biden, but it would only take 6 degrees of separation and I would find a connection to him. So my sister knows a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy who knows Biden type thing. So I've seen this man many times, but when you're from a small town, it's like not unfathomable, but the feeling I would get is like, who is this dude? Where do I know him? So even the first time you see him, you feel that, but then you see him a couple more times and you're like, why do I keep running into this guy? Well, in my early 20s, I moved to a different town, same state, different town, much bigger metropolitan area. Yet I still saw this man a couple occasions relatively quickly after moving. But it was always in a way where he was like across the street, or he was, in a place where I couldn't approach him, but he would be looking at me, catching me looking at him. And it wasn't a smile and it wasn't a smirk. It was just kind of like almost like a ambiguous stare. And then I would move on my way. Well, as I became more knowledgeable and became more aware of demons and spiritual warfare, I had an incident where I was looking out the window of a townhouse that I owned, and I had gone through a breakup, so I was alone. And I had this big townhouse that was too big for me now because, life had shrunk, and I was like, am I going to keep this place? Because I'm going to have to pay the mortgage myself without two incomes, that type of thing. I wasn't really living for Christ then, so I was living with somebody out of wedlock. And so I was struggling with my spirituality. This is probably for the best, but you shouldn't have been living with her. But, that whole thing. So I was a mess, not necessarily from the breakup, but because of this kind of existential crisis. And when I looked out the window, I saw this man at the tennis courts where I could see him out the window. And like a movie, like the hair on my back of my neck and my arms is standing up right now as I tell this. I saw this man at the tennis courts playing tennis, and he turned and looked at me like he knew I was watching him. Then I saw the smile. And in my spirit, I knew that's Satan. That's the devil. And he, in his, massive task to destroy humanity, has at times found time to watch me. And I'm not saying I'm special. I'm not saying I've welcomed it. I wish I would never have seen it, or definitely wish I never had known it. And so I went through this moment where I was like, well, why me? Am I special? And then I realized everybody's probably seen him in some way, shape, or form. Or everybody's at least seen the demon that is under Satan in the hierarchy, who is attached to you. And I'm not saying that you should be on the lookout now for, I've seen this person 20 times in my life, that's a demon, and start screaming at him in public. But I am saying pay attention. Pay attention to your body. How do you feel? What is your spirit telling you? Do you get an uneasy feeling? Is there somebody that's popping in your head right now that you wonder, is that what he's talking about? And so in Josephine's story, her demon came to her and said to her, I've been watching you for a while, or I've saw you before, but I was hoping I'd run into you again. Well, he was watching her for a while because the scheme was in play and the name of the demon was important. Now, I'm going to talk to you about another portion of this that I feel is really vital to this situation. And I think that it's important to understand that whether you believe in demons or not, they are out to get you. And I want you to think of how you would know. And I noticed in this letter that her friends somehow knew, somehow were able to discern very quickly. Even the professor knew. A professing atheist, his first instinct was, this is a demon. You better go get a religious person. But how would you know? Now, I think how I want to approach this is delicately. So if you hear the kind of the intentional kind of pauses in my voice, it's because I want to tread lightly but honestly. If you're listening to this podcast and you're not sure, there is a reality that you really need to grasp. And I just said it, and I'm going to say it again, maybe a little differently. I believe that there are demons right now that have a plan to tear your life apart. And more importantly, to tear you away from Jesus, especially if you're a non-believer. All this paranormal activity that you see, I believe exists because paranormal activity has drastically increased. We have a zillion paranormal television shows on TV right now, and they've seemed to have died down a little bit, but man, 10 years ago, the whole Travel Channel became the Ghost Channel. I don't even know why they call it the Travel Channel. The only thing that's on there for a decade was paranormal shows, because it was such a topic, and it still is, because there's so much paranormal activity. And yes, there's cameras everywhere now that can capture things. And I would say a vast majority of things that you see are hoaxes. You know, there's a big phenomenon now where like things will fly across the room, but when you do a quick Google search and figure out what it looks like when somebody's in a green suit, and they could use, you know, that green suit as a way to record, and it looks almost like either no movement at all or some sort of shadowy blob that moves right over to the toaster before it flies off the counter. Well, that's because somebody's in a green suit and the green suit isn't perfect. And so the little shadowy blob walks over to the toaster and throws it. And most people will look at that and say, see, you could almost see the shadow walk over to it before the toaster moved. Well, do some research. You'll see that that's probably fake. But the unintentional casting of a shadow in the green suit actually made the video more believable. But there are videos and there is evidence that is indisputable. It's undeniable. Things have been captured that were never captured before. And to not believe is easy when you look at the tremendous amount of fakes and the tremendous amount of skeptics who can, you know, duplicate or, you know, kind of see how something was done. But keep in mind, even in Moses's day, Moses came to do these miracles in front of Pharaoh, and there was these people there that could duplicate these miracles. Not all of them, but some of them, because there's ways that you can see how these fakes have influenced people's minds who don't want to believe. But when you look at something face to face, when you've seen something face to face, your mind changes. Or you do something else, which is you instantly say, well, I don't know what that was, but I refuse to believe. But all of us, and maybe, you know, 99%, maybe all is not the perfect word, but I would say almost all of us have had something that happened to us that is unexplainable. And when that does happen, you look at the situation and you say, like, what was that? And if your instinct is paranormal isn't real, this is not, you know, something that I couldn't explain if I had more information. When you live like that, you may actually be in a place where you are deteriorating any ability to fend off this type of attack when it occurs. You see, I want to get what I'm treading lightly about is this. When you have some level of faith and you have some level of understanding of Jesus or even religion, a demon can attach to you in a way that you still have portions of yourself, but it's influencing a certain section. But when you are a complete non-believer, you are wide open. And the Holy Spirit of God protects all of us, even non-believers, because I will say this 1,000 times. If demons had their way with us, they'd pull our arms off and beat us to death with them, and that would be it. They would destroy us. But there's a protection that's around us that God is allowing us just subtle doses of this stuff so we'll turn to him, that we'll realize this is true. And if these things are after me, I need a savior. Oh, his name's Jesus. Let me go to that guy. But when they can keep us deceived, when they finally do make their move, it is usually something severe like this. So if Mary, the Christian, comes to a deliverance session because she is struggling with a spirit of let's say a spirit of rage, and she is lashing out at her family, she's breaking objects, she comes to deliverance, she prays, the demon of rage is lifted from her, she goes back to normal. But 80% of the day she was good, 20% of the day she was in a rage, but the real her isn't ever in a rage. She knows how to manage her anger. She's not under the influence of a demon of anger. But if she has no faith, it is subtly deteriorating her until she is wide open. All doors are open, all windows are open, and the demon just comes in, takes over. And praise God for the group of friends that this woman had, which sounds only like one of them was even a Christian. But they were all able to see, and I would say that was divine. That was God opening the eyes of these people who didn't believe in God, that were telling her, you better go find God. You see, that can only be divine intervention. That can only be the Holy Spirit saying, this woman is valuable to me. I'm even going to use you, non-believers, as a way to get her to someone who could introduce her to me. And so I listen to this story and I say, this is the perfect time for this. And I'm going to get on a soapbox a little bit as we wrap up, but I want this to be in your ear. I want you to look around the world this week. And I want you to see the evil that is in plain sight. In case you're wondering why I started this podcast after the announcements with a man eating a leg, is because there was a man eating a leg in California this week. How much more evidence do you need to see of the evil that is right in front of our eyes? How many people read that on social media, Twitter, Instagram, wherever people have been reposting it, and said, wow, that guy's crazy. Anyway, let's go to Roadhouse and have a steak. Like how many people ignored that? Because I'm telling you this, in the 1950s, if there would have been a story on the network news at 5:00 that a man was eating a leg, people would have ran to the church and knelt down and started praying. That was not normal just, 60, 70 years ago. That would have been international news story. It would have caused panic in the streets. People would have been afraid to let their kids outside. And now, I'll bet you most of you listening didn't even see that story. That's how much evil is in the world. Again, there's cannibals in Haiti who have taken over the government. And the story is, well, they're just kind of eating people a little bit, so everybody's afraid of them. Well, I don't eat people at all, not even a little bit. If you offered me a little bit of a person just to try it, my answer is no. That's not normal. There are so many people that will fight me saying that you talk about Wicca and witchcraft, and you don't have any idea that these are different sects, there's a church of Satan, and then there's devil worshipers, and they're all different, and you speak of them all as one. Well, Why are you confronting me? Why are you trying to convince me? You know what I believe in. My Bible says that if you're not for me, you're against me. And you're trying to explain to me that the Church of Satan doesn't really believe in Satan. They're just kind of anti-God and anti-Bible and want you to make your own decisions and live your own. Well, where does that come from? Well, we don't really believe in Satan. Well, then you might be deceived because he's telling you to do the same things that an antichrist would do. Don't believe the Bible. Those Christians are weird. You should make your own decisions and live your own life. The Satanic Bible is basically an inverse of the Bible, right? So you're trying to convince me that they're not Satanists, but they're against God. Well, I don't care what you call that. That is demonic to me. Wicca. Well, it's not the same as witchcraft. They're not doing this, and there's good witches and white witches. My Bible tells me that there should be no witches. Now, what is the point of that? To pick a fight? Absolutely not. Please hear my heart. I just want you to be aware, is what you believe going to open the door to these things? Or is it going to shut the door? Because evil is everywhere. It's coming for all of us. One of the things that I've done in my career is I've had the fortunate interactions with people who are Satanists, are actively worshiping Satan, Lucifer. And I have heard stories of people that were so connected that they would literally, and these are stories, I didn't see it myself, but they could literally make money disappear out of somebody's wallet or out of their drawer and send it to another Satanist who needed money for something, that they can do these mystical kind of apportation type behaviors to help out the cause. And these people would often tell me, like, I see the light on you and it makes me aggravated. Well, why is that? Well, because we're enemies. And I would tell them, well, you're not my enemy. I care about you. And Jesus cares about you. And he wants nothing more for you to turn from what you're doing to him so you can spend eternity with him. And they would tell me, well, do you know what my rewards in hell are going to be? And I would, just like I did there, audibly laugh out loud. Satan's not in charge of the lake of fire. He's in there with you. There's no authority. You're all burning together. There's no loyalty with Satan. You will probably suffer more. Why have you been convinced? It's not for him to grant eternal rewards. That's only God's ability to grant that. It's only his prerogative to grant that. No one else's. You're deceived. And they would get mad, but you would also see the revelation. See, my God is a God of character, morals, standards. If God exists and he tells me, you do these things, you follow me, I'll forgive you, and there will be rewards from you and for you in heaven, I can look forward to that. But Satan is a deceiver, a liar, a manipulator, a vengeful being. But you're going to trust him to grant you reward, some sort of hierarchy? My God is loving and compassionate and kind. Your God tells you things like my God wasn't, but my God has always been. And you know, you can listen to previous podcasts for those types of debates because people always want to throw in, well, God was vengeful. You have no idea who God was vengeful against. When you do your research, everything I'm saying now is true. But what's important is that these people are going to be, they've opened themselves up and they become pawns for these beings that hate their guts. Just because you follow Satan doesn't mean these demons stopped hating you. They mock you. They're using you as a pawn, and they're going to destroy you in ways that most people won't be, because you have opened yourself up wholly and completely. And again, look at the evil in the world. The mass shootings, the abductions, the violence against children, the just overall violence in the world, the wars and rumors of wars. There is an antichrist spirit on the earth right now. It has infiltrated society. I'll take something simple. There's a woman in New York who came home and found a dozen or so squatters in her home, and the police will do nothing to help her because of, I guess, some squatters' right law. What? When did right become wrong and wrong become right? So to go with that, I saw an immigrant man on a video that was screaming with this angry, demonic look and tone on his face, saying, "This is how we're going to take U.S. land. I'm going to teach you how to go take people's properties." Now, I'm going to ask you a question. If you got on your social media, TikTok, Instagram, wherever these videos are posted, and you posted about your intentions to commit a crime, would you be arrested? Would somebody turn you in and say, "Hey, Sally just got on TikTok and said that she is going to start breaking into homes and robbing people at gunpoint, and she's going to start right here"? Your own friends would turn you in, and I'll guarantee you that the police would show up with the video and at least have a discussion with you. But when it's this, nobody does anything. Now, well, there's rights and there's laws. Yeah, the laws are just as twisted as anything else. That's how Satan has really taken over this country, is that because the laws have been twisted and they're not laws. They're not just anymore. Justice is where we get the word just from, and there is no justice. And I'm not saying the judicial system was perfect in the past, but criminals get all the rights and victims get no rights now. And there have been victims that have been given too many rights in the past. I'll be the first to say that. But now it's become so opposite that a woman could lose her home. And people may not see that as evil, but yes, it is evil. What type of people would find somebody who has an empty house and move in and take it? Are those moral people? Are those Christians doing that? And that's my punch to the face to you who do not believe in God. Are those Christians that are doing that? You always want to point out how Christians are hypocrites and so on and so forth. How much do you want to bet that those aren't devoted, sellout, Jesus-following Christians who took that woman's home? You know the answer to that. They are godless people. And I wanted this letter to be read because as we get to the latter part of season 2 and we talk to more people, we are going to continue to reach out to those of you to try to teach this concept that demons are real. They are influencing us. Ultimately, we're responsible because ultimately we give the permissions. But when you're aware, you see the schemes before they infiltrate your lives. When you're aware, you understand how much protection you need from the God who loves you. And when you live like that, you will see the evil brighter, more vivid than you did before, because the Holy Spirit is guiding you in your interactions. I actually believe that there are scary times ahead for us because I believe we're in the end times. And if you believe that, then you believe that the book of Revelation is playing itself out, and there's some horrible things that are coming for humanity. I'm asking you, are you on the right side of this thing? Are you so sure that there is no God and there are no demons? As we read last week, that my sky daddy is just some made up fairy tale, and that, as some people often send me that funny little meme that says the only thing worse than having an imaginary friend is an imaginary enemy. That one's actually pretty clever. I have to laugh. These aren't imaginary. And for those of us who have seen these things and experienced these things, we almost wish they were imaginary, that demons weren't real, but they are. And as you read this letter, please hear that there's hope. And please hear, and I don't want to speak for Josephine, and hopefully as I talk to her, she would agree with this, that part of this letter is for you not to be where she was. You don't want this for your life. There is beautiful grace to immerse yourself in. Grace meaning unmerited or undeserved favor. I'll close with this. I'm a very flawed man who's done some very horrible things and wounded many people. And I used to be ashamed of that. And, you know, there's still days where I kind of wince and say, man, I can't believe I did that. But grace is so abundant that it's offensive. You know, a guy that I really, really like, that I listen to often, he's a rebel pastor like me, except his full-time ministry has now been one that he has deemed he is a recovery center disguised as a church. And his church is the Sanctuary in Jupiter, Florida, but you could find him on YouTube. And this week he recently put out a post that said something to the effect of, grace is so offensive, not because of who God left out, it's because who he let in. And I'm paraphrasing that, and I probably butchered that, but you get the point. Like, people say, you're a hypocritical Christian. Yes, we're all hypocrites. The only difference is I understand my weaknesses and I give them over. I don't pretend to be perfect. We're all hypocrites. You show me any person and let me follow them for 5 minutes, I'll show you their hypocrisy. Even people that say they're atheists are hypocrites because they scream out to God all day, whether it's using his name in vain or screaming out to him when they hit their hand with the hammer. There's no God, they wouldn't scream out to him. It's an instinct. It's a human instinct. And so there's hypocrisy in all of us. But when you discover grace, you discover that you don't have to be perfect, that you give your life over to this Jesus and he fixes you subtly, little by little, step by step. You become who he wants you to be. And when you get to the point where you sell out, you're free, not because you found perfection, but because you understood that it's in your imperfection and your acknowledgement of that he takes over and shines through. His grace is made perfect in your weakness. His strength, the evidence of him, comes through when you let go of what you're trying to do and let him take over. And that is how we battle evil. I don't fight evil. If you ever hear me pray, it's in my name that I expel this demon, turn this podcast off, report me to somebody who will listen, tell everybody never to listen to me. It's in Jesus' name we do these things. If you ever bring somebody to your house to help you with a demonic problem and they don't use the name of Jesus, get them out. There's no force on earth that can conquer these things except for Jesus. And when we put our lives in him, he will protect us through our darkest moments. It doesn't mean we won't experience them, but what it does mean is that he's never going to leave us and never going to forsake us. With that being said, I want to thank you so much for listening to tonight's episode. Please remember to always like, subscribe, hit the bells, hit the rate and reviews if you can. Those help us out immensely. I also want to remind you, you can find us on all the social medias, Freedom from the Struggle Podcast. Twitter is FFTS Podcast. You can find us there Please like, subscribe on those as well. And lastly, I want to tell you that there is a Patreon campaign. If you want more content, we have a couple of different levels there. But at the $5 level, you can hear 2 bonus episodes every month. And those are usually more storytelling and not so much personal. They're usually about some well-known hauntings or not so well-known hauntings that are out there in the world that we can diagnose and dissect. So thank you again for joining us. I hope God brings you so much peace this week that you don't even know what to do with it. Many blessings to you. We'll see you next time.